Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar entitled U.S. Rice, the Sustainability Powerhouse. I'm Chris Boomsma, Director of Education at the American Society of Agronomy, and it's my privilege to be co-moderator today with Lydia Holmes, who's coming to us from USA Rice, and she'll introduce herself in just a moment. But before we get started, just a few things. First, I want to thank the Rice Foundation and USDA NRCS for sponsoring today's webinar. Lydia will talk a little bit more about the Rice Foundation and their connection with USDA and NRCS and the funding that they received to make this webinar free of charge to you. So we do greatly appreciate sponsorship here at ASA because it does, again, make this free of charge to you, and it allows us to deliver you great education content at obviously a very, very reasonable cost. So thank you to the Rice Foundation and USDA and NRCS. A few housekeeping items, as always, before we get started. First of all, if you are having any issues with what you're seeing on the screen from a technical standpoint, maybe you had some registration problems, whatever it may be, please contact Michelle Lovejoy. You can see her email address and phone number on the screen at this time. Reach out to her. She'll try to get it fixed as quickly as possible. Secondly, we will have a nice Q&A period at the end of today's webinar, right after the presentation. So submit your questions to me at any time using the questions feature built into GoToWebinar panel. Just submit away. I'll take those questions, order them, screen them, and then pose them to our presenters and my co-moderator, Lydia, at the end of today's webinar after the presentation. So we're going to hold them and then talk at the end via Q&A. Third, please note that this training session is being recorded. It'll be available to you about 1 week after completion, but hopefully sooner you will get access to both the recording and the slides. So be on the lookout for that. You'll get a link telling you that that's available. Next, please be on the lookout for future webinars offered by the American Society of Agronomy in the coming months. We're going to take a little bit of a break here during harvest season across North America, and we'll come back late fall, early winter, and really hit it hard with a lot of webinars in that period. So be on the lookout for those. And now I'm going to introduce our speakers before we turn it over to Lydia. First of all, we have Jennifer James, who's a fourth generation farmer of H&J Land Company, which is a 6,000 acre row crop operation in Newport, Arkansas. She currently serves as chairwoman of the USA Rice Sustainability Committee. She's also a member of the Riceland Foods Board of Directors, St. Louis Federal Reserve Bank Agribusiness Industry Council, Arkansas Agriculture Board, and many other things. She's just really a great leader in the agriculture space. She was honored in 2017 with the Field to Market Farmer of the Year Award for her outstanding conservation and sustainability leadership efforts. And with regards to education, she graduated from the University of Arkansas with a bachelor's in ag business. That'll be our first speaker. We have three more. Our second is Bill Jones, who's the Rice Agronomy Manager for Anheuser-Busch. In this role, he serves as a trusted advisor on agronomic insights and sustainable solutions for rice growers in the Northeast Arkansas and Southeast Missouri areas. He also leads the development of sustainable practices and strategies to support rice growers in achieving Anheuser-Busch's 2025 sustainability goals. He was previously a barley agronomist for Anheuser-Busch in North Dakota, during which time he became a CCA. He graduated with bachelor's and master's degrees in plant and soil science from Oklahoma State University. Our third speaker is George Dunklin, who grew up in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, not far from Stuttgart, Arkansas, known as the rice and duck capital of the world. After college in Memphis, he moved to Arkansas County to farm and has been doing so ever since. His abiding passion for and dedicated service to conservation led him to become a member of the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission from 2005 to 2012. He served as its chairman from 2011 to 2012. After volunteering since the age of 16, he became president of Ducks Unlimited from 2013 to 2015. George holds a BBA degree from the University of Memphis. And our final speaker today will be Paul Butner, who's a project manager at the California Rice Commission, where he also serves as manager of environmental affairs. He's been in that role since 2001. He has nearly 30 years of environmental resources management and public policy experience, and previously worked at Resource Management International and Cargill. He has a bachelor's in environmental science from University of California, Berkeley. So there is our slate of speakers today. You're going to hear from all of them. But first, before that occurs, I'm going to turn it over to Lydia. Lydia, thank you for being with us and for co-moderating today. And when you are ready, just go ahead and show your slides and take it away.
Great, thank you so much, Chris. So as Chris mentioned, I'm with USA Rice. USA Rice is the national trade association for the entire rice industry, including farmers, millers, merchants, and industry partners. Our work includes promoting the consumption of US grown rice domestically and abroad, advocating for the industry in Washington, and providing educational resources like this for our members. The Rice Foundation funds research projects to address issues that are important to the industry and supports leadership and education programs, including the Rice Leadership Development Program and the U.S. Rice Sustainability Report. So you've likely heard the word sustainability around a lot. There's been a lot of press about climate change and sustainability and resiliency, all these buzzwords floating around. So for us, when we talk about sustainability, we're talking about a definition that's really similar to what the UN has used. So meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Looking at the three pillars of sustainability, which are environmental, so looking at environmental resource use, economic, so you're not a sustainable farm if you can't sustain your economics. And then also social sustainability, which in the US, internationally, social sustainability, you're looking at things like child labor, women's rights, worker safety. A lot of those things, pretty much all of those things, are required by regulation in the US. We have very strong rules around that, and very good actors in the US farmers and mills that really, they do those things anyway, but they're also required by law. So those are less a concern for us. And so when we talk about social sustainability, we're talking about the community and how farmers and mills and merchants and all of the businesses around agriculture are contributing to their communities. So in the rice industry, we knew that we had a good story to tell. We knew that people were doing things, but we didn't have it all in one place. And so over the past 2 years, the Rice Foundation, with funding from the NRCS, spent a lot of time pulling all of the data and all of the stories together on why the rice industry is sustainable and what all is happening. So that report was released earlier this year, and here are some of the major findings of that report. Over the past 36 years, we've seen decreases in key environmental resource areas, and we're producing more than ever while using fewer resources like land, water, energy, soil, and emitting fewer greenhouse gases. So because rice is grown usually on heavy clay soils, soil erosion has never really been the main area where the rice industry has focused. But over that 36-year period from 1980 to 2016, we did see a 28% decrease in soil erosion, while we also saw an increase in land use efficiency. So with the land use efficiency, that tells us that we are producing more per acre. And also with soil erosion, using practices like minimum or no-till, precision land leveling, those things are not only helping with erosion, they're also helping with many of the other resource areas that we care about. One of those being water use. So over that 36-year period, we saw a 52% decrease in water use. A lot of that has to do with things like land leveling and some of the different irrigation practices that have been innovated in the industry, using a more shallow flood, multiple inlet rice irrigation, using polytubing, and some of the accuracy, the tools that help provide accuracy, more accurate irrigation with that polytubing, alternate wetting and drying, furrow irrigation or row rice, and things like tailwater recovery systems that help you recycle water. So this is definitely an area, water use is one where as an industry there's been a lot of focus on this, and there continues to be a lot of focus and research on ways to use water in the most efficient way possible. Water quality. So rice is a natural filtration system. You put, as you can see in the photo on this slide, the photo on the right, the jar of water that's murky, that's surface water that went into a rice field. The other jar in his hand that's clear, that's the water that came out on the other side. So because the water moves slowly through the rice field, the rice actually acts as that filtration system. And so the water leaving the field can be a lot cleaner and clearer than what goes in. So not only with, that's kind of thinking a little bit about sediment, but some of the other things that we've seen that help with water quality, again, are no or minimum till, land leveling, using things like filter strips and buffers, integrative pest management, and furrow nutrient management, all things that rice farmers and those of you that are crop consultants and researchers are thinking about all the time. How do we keep the nutrients where we want them? We've also seen significant decreases in energy use and increases in air quality. So as I mentioned, we've seen a 41% decrease in greenhouse gas emissions. Some of those water use practices are actually part of the reason we've seen that reduction. We've also seen a decrease in energy use. A lot of that, you guys see this in the field, more efficient equipment, the move from changing wells over to different energy sources instead of diesel. Again, that helps with the air quality piece as well. So lots of things happening on the energy use and air quality front that just continue to get better. One of the things you'll hear about today in particular is biodiversity. So in the rice industry, we are very proud of the story that we have to tell around biodiversity. You'll hear us say things like what's good for rice is good for ducks. You can see the map on this slide. The areas that are highlighted there, those are some of the critical flyways that have been identified as ones that are in need of additional wetland habitat and are the areas where waterfowl go in the winter and they're looking for food and shelter. And it just so happens that if you overlap a map that shows the concentration of where rice is grown in the US, it overlays pretty perfectly with this map that shows where ducks need those resources, ducks and other waterfowl. And so rice fields provide that perfect win-win for the ducks. It's habitat, there's energy for them there, there's food and for them in the fields, and it also is a way for people to also get recreation out of that as well. So it's something that's really ingrained in the culture of the rice industry and something that we're extremely proud of. The other stat on the slide you'll see is that it would cost $3.4 billion to replace those overwinter flooded rice fields with managed wetlands. So not only is it great for recreational purposes and it's great for the ducks, but it's also something that would be extremely difficult to replace. So we're very proud of that story, and you'll hear from a couple of our speakers later more about our commitment to biodiversity, not just waterfowl, but other creatures as well. So the last piece of sustainability is social and economic. The rice industry, like many other industries, in order to be sustainable, you have to be economically profitable, and we feel you also have to be a part of providing thriving communities around you. There are many areas of the rice growing regions that there are entire towns, communities, and regions that are fully supported by the rice industry. Almost everyone there works in some capacity across an allied business or within the industry itself, and so we're very proud of that fact and very proud of the work that farms and businesses do in those communities in order to support them. So you can see over 125,000 jobs are provided, and there's a lot of economic value from both the farm side and the mill side in those communities. Along with sort of the economic side, it's also really important to our industry to give back. So 40 million pounds of rice are, on average, are given annually through domestic food aid, things like food banks. So lots of great things in our industry, lots of great stories to tell, and a very strong commitment to that. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to our next speaker, Jennifer James, who is going to talk about the farmer's commitment to sustainability in our industry. Jennifer?
Thanks, Lydia. I'm glad to be here with you guys this morning just to give you a little perspective from the boots on the ground view from the farmer in the field. You can go ahead and start with the next slide, Lydia. So this is just a picture of our operation. You can see the sign up front that we are an Arkansas Century Farm, which when you talk about farming in across our country, really not just in the rice industry, but across the country, 96 to 98% of the operations are family owned. And so the longevity and the generations of farming in each operation are really important to those people who are involved. When I was a little girl, I wasn't all that excited about the farm. I like to go out to the farm just really so I could see my dad, because there might be days or weeks at a time, in the spring planting season or harvest where I was still asleep when he left for work and I was already back in bed when he got home. So we'd go out to the farm just to have a picnic and to see him. And so I have a lot of memories about the farm in my younger years. But as I got older, as a teenager, I wasn't real excited about the farm. I had better things I thought I needed to do and wanted to get out of the rural area of Arkansas and go to the big city, maybe even be a lawyer or congressman or something like that. But I went to the University of Arkansas, which, as you may know, is in the Ozark Mountains, so much different terrain than the Delta flatlands of eastern Arkansas where rice is grown. And I just got really homesick. So I changed my major to ag business, and I called home and said, "Hey, Dad, I'm coming home. I hope you got a job for me." And luckily he did. So we're harvesting my 26th crop, and I've been working hard volunteering in the rice industry for most of my career and advocating on behalf of farmers and in agriculture in Arkansas and across the country. So that's kind of what brings me here to you today, because I've served as the chairman of the U.S. Rice Sustainability Committee for going on 10 years now. So you may ask, well, why is sustainability important? So you can go to the next slide, Lydia. So for me, and I think for many other farmers, it's about our legacy, it's about the land, it's about our family. So a couple of guys in these pictures are the reasons why it's important to me. My husband and my son. Our son is a freshman at Arkansas State now and is majoring in agriculture and wants to come home. So keeping our operation economically sustainable is really important these days, and I know it's important for a lot of other farmers. So that's really a lot of the focus sometimes, I think. But we keep working hard on a lot of other efforts, and that's why we do a lot of these sustainable practices that we do on our farms. So just having the operation, we are a family, obviously, but we have to be able to run our operations like any other corporate business. We have to follow the sound science. We have to be sure and stay up on technologies and advancements that are moving our industry forward. And we need to be sure that we understand what our costs are. We need to understand about our markets and just all the facets of our business. And so being sustainable, not only economically, but conserving our natural resources in the environment, it's vitally important. We're raising our kids here. We live right here. We want to make sure that all of these resources are available to the next generation to be able to produce crops and produce the next rice crop on for many, many more generations, hopefully. So I think that's why it's so vitally important for farmers to understand the link that we play in the sustainability model. It's not only domestic, but it's globally that we're competing now. So you can go to the next slide, Lydia. So making sure that the next generation understands that we work really hard on our farm to manage our rice fields for the habitat, and creating the habitat and having the winter flooded fields. And since we started doing that many years ago, that we have seen an increase in the sighting of mature and immature bald eagles in the area. The snow goose migration that comes through here provides, I guess, a hunting ground for those type of birds as well. So it's pretty cool to be in your front yard or your backyard and have a bald eagle fly over. I know I never saw them very much as a child. So we've seen an increase in that. We've also seen an increase in our farm of the tundra swans. We started out with just a few that would come through in the winter, and now we actually have a flock of about, it can be anywhere from 10 to 12 that's grown over the past few years. So that's really exciting to see, not only the ducks and the geese and the other habitat that is usually here, but to begin seeing an increase in other species is really exciting. It also provides great community for our family and our friends to come out and enjoy the outdoors and to see what's going on the farm and to be able to share our story and to tie our children and their children to the land. So when you go to the next slide, it's about our future and what is our future. And from the farmer's perspective, it's a lot about what I've spoken about the legacy and being able to pass this down to our children, and our hope that they want to be involved in these operations. This picture is a picture of our century farm that's been in my family for over 100 years. So it represents the past, it represents the present, that the work that we have done toward conservation, toward implementing practices that are keeping us sustainable. That's a small reservoir on our farm that was constructed with great vision by my father and his siblings in an area where underground water is quite abundant, and had some pressure actually, to move forward with some of these projects. But it's having vision like that, looking toward our future, that's going to keep us all here. And I know that other farm families are doing the same thing next door and across the country. And it's just part of the example that farmers are making for everyone and for the consumer about what we're doing to stay sustainable and to keep producing a safe, affordable supply of rice and other crops on our farms well into the future.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. So now we're going to have Bill Jones from Anheuser-Busch talk about why companies are also committed to sustainability.
Thanks, Lydia. So first off, I just want to thank everybody for being here with us this morning, and also thank you to the organizers for giving me the opportunity to tell a little piece of our story and how we're trying to navigate and operate within an ever-changing ag landscape. Next slide, please, Lydia. So to get started, sustainability is our business. We've been around for a very long time, and we rely on, the highest quality ingredients to make our products. And we have 12 breweries in the U.S., multiple vertical operation facilities, which range from, hops, barley, and rice, as well as can plants, multiple distributor partners, and a whole plethora of vertical operations that support our breweries and our products. And so with sustainability, comes supply security, and that's very critical to our past success, and is even more critical as we navigate the changing landscapes in which we operate in. Next slide, please, Lydia. And so we made a global commitment to consumers and to potential partners, whether it's on the grower side or in the the business venture side, that we are committed to making a measurable impact. And so this is a slide here, as you can see, of our 4 pillars of sustainability. One is being the water stewardship, where 100% of all of our facilities globally will be engaged in water saving measures, and also for quality. Below that, you'll see renewables and carbon. I think we've seen a picture earlier of a solar field, but we we are already at 50% of total electricity in the U.S. is coming from renewable sources. Much of that is a wind facility in Oklahoma called Thunder Ranch. The rest of it will be online here shortly as part of solar fields. So the other piece to that puzzle is our carbon footprint. We have made commitments to purchase Tesla and Nikola semis, both electric and hydrogen, who will help us achieve that net zero carbon footprint. To the right of the renewables picture, you'll see circular packaging. This is where we're committed that 100% of our packaging will either be recyclable or returnable for reuse. And the returnables, are very popular in international markets, but haven't been explored recently here in the U.S. So that is something to look forward to, and something that all consumers could participate in. And last but certainly not least is our smart agriculture pillar, and that's kind of where we're going to focus today, and that's why we're all here. So for Anheuser-Busch and for our growers, smart ag to us means that 100% of our farmers will be skilled, connected, and financially empowered. And that can mean a lot of many different things, depending on where you're at in the world. But here later, I'll tell you very briefly on what that means for us, and more importantly, what that means for us and our growers here in the Mid-South. Next slide, please. So this is just a picture of our zone president signing a contract with the sun. And this is a commitment to our solar field. You can see in the background that will provide the other portion of our renewable source. So this is our commitment that we're in this for the long term, and hopefully setting the stage to change the mindset and maybe try to make a change in industry where we believe we all should be going. Next slide, please. And this is just a slide representing, our wind farm out at Thunder Ranch in Oklahoma. If you notice on the Budweiser packaging, we've now created a label where all of our Budweiser in the U.S. is brewed with renewable electricity. And as I mentioned earlier, we're working on a plan to get the other brands so 100% of our total products, will be produced with renewable electricity. With that said, the picture on the left, that's actually in a barley field up in North Dakota. But, we partner with our vertical facilities. That's a malt house in the back. And so we're doing plot work. We have our own barley breeding facility. We're actively engaged in increasing efficiencies on the farms. Next slide. And so that takes us, to more detailed overview of smart ag, and then some comments here on how we can apply this in rice. So as stated earlier, 100% of our farmers will be skilled, connected, and financially empowered. So what do we mean by skilled? And so for us, this means that our growers are growing an approved variety, whether it's a public, private, an AB variety. They're growing an approved variety, and they also have access to best management protocols to help the grower grow that particular variety, regardless of the crop. And then also, they have the opportunity to receive agronomic advice from someone like myself or another partner to give that in-season reassurance that crop is in the highest quality of stage, the plant health looks good, and the fertility is there to ensure a successful season. That's more the agronomic side. On the connected piece, this is where we're looking at our farm data to engage the growers and engage the growers with us in an insight-driven platform. And what our end goal here is to collect data that's already being collected for the most part, to derive agronomic insights in season with hopes of gaining some predictive analytics. And what our end goal is here is, since supply security is so critical, and we highly value the growers who partner with us. And it's not just about the partnership, it's about providing the highest quality raw materials. In this case, it's rice. And so if we can develop a platform, identify partners who provide on-farm value to optimize inputs, optimize the dollar on the farm to maintain yield or maintain quality, in some cases increase that, then we will be behind that 100% to support our growers as they produce our raw materials. Now, financially empowered is pretty easy here in the U.S. This is basically is a statement where the producers are enrolled in risk management solutions. For us, most of that is considered crop insurance. Do you have access to crop insurance? Other parts of the world, some growers don't have bank accounts, and other growers don't have the opportunity to enroll in risk management solutions. And the biggest piece I want to focus on here is the subsidies or cost sharing programs. We're a proud supporter of the RSP. So we're always looking at opportunity to partner, to promote internally, externally, et cetera, for government programs such as RSP to help these growers implement innovative technologies that otherwise they may be hesitant to. And so, there's a lot of work out there that's going on as we speak. And I think we'll see some exciting things come here pretty soon around partnerships with on-farm technologies. So at the end of the day, as I said earlier, our goal is to optimize the grower's inputs without compromising the yield or the quality. And most importantly, we heard before, is we don't want to we don't want to have an impact on the culture. And in this case, it's duck hunting. So, our goal isn't to save as much water as we can. Our goal is to optimize that water while maintaining a healthy habitat status, while maintaining yield and quality of the rice that's grown on those acres. So this is like I said, a very high level insight into how Anheuser-Busch is looking at sustainability, more importantly in the smart ag sector here with rice. But this is all that I have to share today, and I'm looking forward to engaging in future conversations. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bill. As you can see, the sustainability generally is very complicated. And for most crops, they only really have to worry about the complicated nature of sustainability during the growing season. But for rice, the winter season, the off season, is just as important because of the habitat that the industry can provide for waterfowl and other creatures. So the next two speakers that you'll hear from are going to talk about that biodiversity aspect of our industry, what happens over the winter when the fields are not producing rice. So next we'll have George Dunklin talk a little bit about biodiversity and rice from his perspective.
Thank you very much, Lydia, and really appreciate the invite to be here to speak about two things I love, and that's rice and ducks. I live here just south of Stuttgart. My wife and I live on our family farm just across the street from our duck hunting lodge called Five Oaks, and so we're very fortunate to get to live where we live, get to do what we do, and get to have what we have. And I didn't grow up in the traditional farming background. My grandfather, L.A. Black, was a farmer here in DeWitt in Arkansas County. He started growing rice and acquiring land back in 1907, and he died the last day of 1945. So I never got to meet him. I was born in '56, but he left quite a legacy for me to follow, and the lands that were there. One time he was a owner of a rice mill, the bank, the John Deere dealership, and he started acquiring quite a few properties in Arkansas and Jefferson counties through his lifetime. My mother was the youngest of his three daughters, and so I was very fortunate to to have for that to happen. My father was in the cottonseed oil mill business in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, which is that's where I was born and raised. And he was not in the farming operation. We were just absentee landowners, but my dad would take me over, and along with my cousin Bill Dunklin, who's a rice farmer down in Shea County, would take us over on Saturday mornings over to near DeWitt to duck hunt. And those mornings and those times we got to spend in the duck blind with my father and got to observe the wonders of the outdoors, I just fell in love with the duck hunting part. So I would, and also on those trips over to Pine Bluff. Now you got to remember this back, I'll be 63 a month from today. So this was back when I was 10, 11, 12 years old. If I was going to go duck hunting, I was going to get an hour lecture over, an hour lecture back from my father. And we didn't have iPods and entertainment systems in the cars like we do in the trucks like we do now. So you listen to your dad. But dad was a great, I don't even remember the word conservationist or ever being mentioned, but he really planted those seeds of conservation in my head at that time, and talked about that we're not the owners of this land. We're simply the caretakers or the stewards the short time we're on this earth, and then we got to leave it better than we found it. And I guess that's where my love for conservation really started, with those trips over and got to visit with my dad and then get to be in the rice field hunting the ducks. And so when I graduated from college, I kind of followed my dad in footsteps. Dad was a world-class tennis player, played all over the world, played U.S. Open and French Open. And I followed him and played at Memphis State. And when I finished in 1980, spring of 1980, I knew that was as far as I was going to go in my tennis career. I came back over just to learn where our farms were, and part of the deal I had to learn how to farm. I wanted to learn how to grow rice and soybeans. So if I was going to do that, but the ducks are what really brought me back over there. The love for the outdoors and that introduction to duck hunting. So when I got over there, I got with one of our tenants, and he started teaching me how to farm. I mean, every day I ask him, what do I do today? How do I start from the very basics? How do you start a tractor? How do you plant rice? How do you put levee gates in? All those things. And so that's how I kind of started my career. But my love for ducks, I wanted to somehow, I knew ducks and rice went really well together. But back then our rotation was 1 year rice, 2 year soybeans. And I knew by farming, I knew the money was in the rice side more than the soybeans. A good soybean crop back in 1981 was 35 bushels an acre. And so I wanted to grow more rice. I wanted to figure out how we create more duck habitat. And so I figured out how we could, and then I bought a hunting lodge from Memphis Furniture Company. So I kind of backed into the hunting business. And so when I bought that lodge, I had to figure out a way to pay for it. And that's what got me into the hunting business. But I also realized I got to figure out how to make these things work. How can we create better duck habitat at the same time, grow continuous rice and lower our costs in rice? I had a disaster of a crop in 1983 when we started raining about this time of the year and didn't quit till about mid-November. We had about 20 inches of rain, and I had a 750 acres of Mars variety. For the older farmers are on the call, you remember that. It was a high yielding variety, but it was very tall and prone to lodging, and it went down and it was a mess. And I said, okay, I got to figure something else out. My cousin Bill, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, he was in the rice business, farming business down to Shea County near Dumas, and he had similar problems. So we really started looking for ways. We studied the California system. We wanted to grow more rice. How could we reduce our risk? And a gentleman just 24 miles north of where I live, Leroy Isbell, had really pioneered zero grade farming. And we went up there and we visited with him, and man, I changed everything. This would have been the early 90s, changed everything I was doing after that. And we took it kind of a step further. We went to no-till rice farming, no-till, zero-grade rice farming. And about that same time, we had a conversion of technologies between Roundup Ready. Roundup was introduced as DPAC back then, much lower costs. You had Caterpillar with track tractors. We just were able to really change and revolutionize the way that we farm. We reduce our risks. There's one of the tractors, pictures with the tractors. And at the same time, we created more duck habitat. And the ducks and the geese, what we would do is flood it every winter after we harvested. After harvest, we would mow it and burn it, and then we would flood it. And when we took the flood off those zero grade fields. That's an example of a zero grade field that's on the screen now. When we took the water off, it was ready to farm again. The ducks and geese had between the fire and the ducks and the geese, the residue was gone and it was ready to go. And we could be in those fields in 3 days of sunshine with that tractor equipment. We were planning for our neighbors. The conventional farmers hadn't even started working the fields yet. So that got us in a rotation of being early. The crop would come off. Now we had, varieties were, Lamont, New Bonnet, Cypress, all these new varieties came in place much earlier season. And so we were able to get the water off, get the crop off earlier before the hurricane season. So we got in a great cycle. Still doing that today. I've actually retired from the actual farming a couple of years ago, but still, Dr. Ronnie Helms and Jay Coker, who helped pioneer this with me, they're still farming that way. And we're still duck hunting the same fields and still doing it the same way. And so we've been doing this since the early 90s. And it really revolutionized everything that we did. But the importance of ducks and geese are really important to these rice fields as far as getting ready for us to farm in the spring. And it also helped our duck hunting lodge. We were able to create more habitat, and it was just a win-win all the way around. Same time, I was a volunteer for Ducks Unlimited and had a chance to go on the board of Ducks Unlimited back in 2003. Ironically, after the rice industry and Ducks Unlimited got crossways on an issue, and we had no representation of agriculture on the board at the time, and so they asked me to join it. And I'm really proud today. I was able to be was elected president in 2013. I served that for 2 years and was chairman for a couple more years. But really proud, with the help of Al Montana, a great rice producer there in California. We put the rice partnership together with the Ducks and Rice have now formally come together and got a great partnership. We were able to leverage funds from Ducks Unlimited side with our relationships with Purina and Rice Tech and other companies, and being able to really secure some funds for rice producers to be able to use this to improve their land, to lower their costs, and to conserve the topsoil, and conserve energy, conserve labor, repairs, all the things that you can do. Those things are now available. And so there's no question that rice is very good for ducks. We know that when we look at South Texas, and there's some studies that have been done when down there a few years ago, some research that showed, South Texas used to have over 600,000 acres. It's now about 150,000 acres of rice. Well, we know that the pintail mortality there is much higher there than it is in the rice growing areas of California. The quality of habitat is degraded, the lack of habitat. And so we know the importance of rice habitat is for our winning waterfowl. If we don't send those birds back to the prairies for the breeding season healthy, then we know our chances of those flights go down, the egg production, all that go down. So the rice industry is critical to Ducks Unlimited and its mission. And I would say the rice industry needs Ducks Unlimited as well, or ducks as well, to promote their incredible conservation story that we have to tell. And so it's been really rewarding to be part of that, from Ducks Unlimited side and also the rice side, and be able to do this as an avocation as well, and to see the results. And we got the fall migration has begun in earnest now, as we got speckled bellies all over the county, and it's starting to really happen. And so I just feel very fortunate to have done that. So that was why I was asked to be here today, just kind of share a very personal note, my story about how this evolved.
Thank you so much, George. So now we're going to hear from Paul Butner from the California Rice Commission. And I think what Paul has to share with you is extremely interesting. You've heard the ducks and rice story, and Now you'll hear about another very innovative use of rice fields as winter habitat for another kind of creature. So Paul, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Lydia, and I'm happy to be here to provide a glimpse of what we've been doing in California for birds, and how we're trying to go into a new area of fisheries conservation as well, to see how our rice fields can contribute to salmon in the Sacramento Valley. So let's go to the next slide. In California, especially in the state legislature, we have been known to be the environmental crop. That's a title that we hold dearly. It has to do with decades of commitment to habitat in California ricelands, about 500,000 acres here in Northern California, the Sacramento Valley. We did a lot of early research to demonstrate that over 200 wildlife species depend on our fields. Of the 500,000 acres that we have, about 350,000 of those are winter flooded, which have exceptional benefits to waterfowl that move through the Pacific Flyway during that time frame. We also did early research to demonstrate that based on the food in those rice fields, a lot of waste grain, that if those fields did not exist, and yet you wanted to support the same numbers of water birds, you would have to acquire and restore about 250,000 acres of wetlands. That would cost you about $3 billion right out of the gate. Then of course you'd have to maintain that habitat, probably at $50 to $100 million a year. So that was an early attempt to try to not just say that rice is good for ducks and vice versa, but what are the economic contributions to Californians from the presence of that habitat? And just in wintering waterfowl, we were able to quantify those numbers. We could do similar analysis for benefits to shorebirds and wading birds and raptors here in the Sacramento Valley. Our fields are designated shorebird habitat of international significance. You could visit manomet.org to learn more about that, but we're the second largest site of its kind in North America, and we have very strong relationships with about a dozen wildlife conservation organizations like Ducks Unlimited that all would agree they don't want one fewer acre of rice in the Sacramento Valley because of the great environmental benefits. Next slide. Here I'm just showing in a pie chart where the winter waterfowl get their food. About 60% of everything they eat comes from rice fields. Interestingly enough, they only get about 35% from the wetlands that remain in the Sacramento Valley. Unfortunately, California is a state that has lost over 90% of its wetlands. So thankfully, a big crop that moved in the North Sac Valley was rice, providing 500,000 acres of surrogate wetlands. So while it provides about 2/3 of the energy of wetlands, when you realize that there's 500,000 acres of rice and only 75,000 acres of wetlands in the Sacramento Valley, it becomes clear the important role the rice fields have here to feed the wildlife in the Sacramento Valley. Next slide, Lydia. And based upon those energetics that I've been talking about, we decided to do an analysis. Well, if for whatever reason we lost rice acres in the Sacramento Valley, 25%, 50%, what would be the loss of ducks? And we can see here that in the bar graph up on the top that if we lost 50% of rice acres, there would be 1 million fewer ducks in the Sacramento Valley. And that is described by the chart below, where you see on the left, the red line is the energy demand from the ducks in the region, and the black line is food availability. And you can see without rice the ducks would starve or have to leave the area around December. But with rice, there's actually a surplus of food in the region. And again, that's almost all the waste grain. Farmers would love to harvest every last grain of rice in their fields, but that is not possible, and they end up leaving very valuable waste grain behind for the birds. So, next slide. While everyone realizes that every rice acre is great for the water birds here in the valley, we've done a tremendous amount of work to understand how we can expand those benefits on a per acre basis with practices that we've developed over the years. The primary partner being NRCS has provided almost all of the funding for us to do this work. Just since 2011, I estimate that NRCS has invested $28 million in enhancing riceland habitat on approximately 525,000 acres. That's a significant amount of conservation investment. We very much appreciate it. And without it, we would not be able to continue to promote our industry as that environmental crop, because these practices are purely for the benefit of wildlife, unlike, I don't know, a method of tillage or something that benefits the agronomic side. These practices are solely for the benefit of the birds. They come at a cost to the producer, either in real quantified costs or increased risk, operational risk. And so without continued funding partnerships with NRCS especially, we would not be able to continue these great practices and help preserve the flyway. Next slide. You know, the reason we've been able to do all this great work on water birds, the Sacramento Valley used to be a massive floodplain historically. However, when we moved into California, we needed to utilize those lands. And so we put levees up, and we essentially separated the river from the floodplain. By farming rice in that floodplain, we've been able to somewhat replicate history and putting the water back out there. Birds are interesting because they are the ultimate random accessor of habitat. When you create it, they fly over, they see it, they drop down, they use it for nesting and other purposes. With fish, the fish are equally reliant on that floodplain. The small salmon historically grew up in that floodplain where there was a lot of food and cover, and they found their way back into the river as larger fish, better able to deal with predators and current, etc. So what we are trying to do, since we've somewhat separated the floodplain from these fish, and with the salmon fishery in decline here, is we're going to try to do the same thing we've been doing for birds for fish. And that started with a $1.4 million project funded primarily through NRCS. And what we're doing is we're actually putting salmon, small baby salmon, into winter flooded rice fields. We're doing some very interesting telemetry where we're putting sophisticated trackers actually inside of the salmon through surgical processes. We're able to monitor the movement of the salmon after they leave our fields and calculate how many of them actually make it out the Golden Gate and into the ocean. We've raised about $750,000 of matching funds to do this work. We're just starting year 2 science this year. Next slide. Here's just a pictorial of the types of activities out there. That's Rochelle Tallman, the lead graduate student researcher from UC Davis. She's amazing. She drives boats, she builds fish cages, she fixes boat motors, she does everything out there. But you can see we're doing actual field work out in the fields to test out modifications to the fields that we believe will be beneficial to the fish and improve their productivity. We have floating fish cages out in the fields to protect the, I call them $300 fish. After one of these radio tags are put into these fish, we need to have them grow to size and release them. The tags are almost $300 a piece. So of course we protect them out there until we're ready to, follow them out to the Golden Gate, kind of like on a video game. And so you can see all the activities that are happening out in the fields. Next slide. So I made an attempt to bring some of the video to you today. It doesn't come across 100% pure, but you'll get the idea. Here's Rochelle talking about our first day where we released 5,000 of the 30,000 fish that we put into the rice field last year.
Today is super exciting because today marks the first day of our project. We were able to put in fish into the rice field, and we were able to do 5,000 tagged fish from the Feather River hatchery so far. It's pretty exciting. There was a couple obstacles actually getting to this first day in terms of tagging and working with collaborators. So it's really exciting to see the fish going because it really marks the start of this project.
Next slide, Lydia. Now she's talking about the deployment of the fish cages. Go ahead.
So today we're going to be deploying our cages. They are 4x4x4. They're made out of PVC pipe and they're encased in plastic mesh. What we plan to do to get the fish in is we're going to actually make kind of a cut within the mesh and then put the fish in and then use resealable zip ties to close it back up again.
And the next slide is we not only do this work, but we want to make sure that the 40 million Californians, many of them the limited connection to agriculture, understand all the environmental things we're doing for rice, with rice out here in California. We work with Armstrong and Getty here, their local radio team, very popular, and they came out to witness the fish surgery. So go ahead, Lydia.
So one of the many ways that California rice benefits the environment, we just watched some fish surgery. Yeah, they're implanting microtransmitters in tiny little salmon that'll swim off and do what salmon do. And California rice is working with UC Davis to help replenish the salmon population in our rivers and streams. It's just amazing work. Yeah, they do some anesthesia on the fish and put a little transmitter in there and then send it on its way. It's pretty amazing. The technology is astounding, and obviously it's just great for the environment. Good stuff.
And finally, I just always want to close with a slide of our contributing partners, major sponsors being USDA, NRCS, and Syngenta, and a number of other important contributing sponsors as well. We could not have done this work without all of these groups contributing. So that's all I have, Lydia, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Paul. All right, so we are now going to go into a short question and answer session. We have a few minutes left here. So please go to the chat box. That's where you can submit your questions. I'll start off with a couple, just any of the presenters who want to answer this, you're welcome to. So first question, some have said sustainability is a fad. Do you agree with that statement? Jennifer or Bill, do you guys want to take that one?
Sure, Jennifer. I think that it's really easy to say that it's a fad because we get these new buzzwords and things that we don't understand the definition of. But I think when it comes to sustainability, we have resources in place that have been researched and implemented for decades in the rice industry. And it just simply goes back to the farmer and a lot of the land grant universities, especially in the beginning, and the research that they have done to progress our in-field practices and things like that over the years, the development of higher yielding varieties, all of the work currently going on about the different types of irrigation methods that we can use. You know, a lot of the things that George mentioned about his change of production practices on his farm. And that just goes back to sustainability. And that may be a buzzword, but we've been doing it for decades in the rice industry.
Anybody else want to add to that at all? Or Chris, do we have any questions in the chat box so far?
We do have one question, if you're ready to take it now, unless we want to finish answering that one, or if you have another one, Lydia, that you want to go through first. It doesn't matter to me.
Sure, let's go to an audience question.
All right, sounds good. Okay, here's the question. A good amount of sustainability is focused on qualitative changes. How does the panel think about quantitative versus qualitative measurement of sustainability?
So this is Bill with Anheuser-Busch. I'll take a stab at this. So, you know, we can see the qualitative changes in terms of, you know, looking at a glass or a cup of water that's clearer than the control or than, you know, the neighbor down the road. But whenever we have such an organized movement in the industry, particularly with the consumer groups and CPGs such as Anheuser-Busch, you know, it's imperative that we have the quantitative data to support our claims. So that way we remove the statement that sustainability is a fad. You know, we have the data, we have the quantitative results to back up and support any type of marketing claim, you know, that we may be making, but also any type of claim that we may be making on behalf of our growers, to elevate them and to put them on a platform to then, you know, influence others and create change in the ag industry. So both qualitative and quantitative are important, but I ultimately lean towards quantitative as what is validating our efforts in the sustainable ag sector.
Awesome, thanks. Anybody else want to comment on that?
Well, this is George. I think qualitative data we certainly can measure by the amount of birds that use these rice fields during the wintertime, and we've been able to measure the amount of fat and the benefits that they're getting out of these rice fields. And so, you know, that's a measurement you certainly can use to justify what we know what we're doing. So, I just think that's another measurement.
Yeah, that's great. Any others want to comment on that particular question before I hand it back to Lydia for another question that she has? Okay, Lydia, I turn it back to you if you have one.
Sure. So this is a question for the whole group, whoever wants to start. But what do you think the biggest challenge for the industry that they're facing around sustainability from your perspective? And what solutions do you see on the horizon for that problem?
Lydia, this is Paul Butner. I'll lead off with the focus on waterbird habitat, wildlife habitat. Certainly the greatest challenge that I see is by far the availability of water, not just the water to grow our crop, which has huge environmental benefits, but the ability to flood our fields in the winter time, because when the demand for water is significant and the availability is down, we see that the continued winter flooding can go under the microscope, and yet the environmental benefits are huge. So I would also talk about continued and sustained funding for conservation practices. You know, I mentioned that these practices are purely for the benefit of wildlife, and so if we don't have a sustained funding source to keep them going, they will not continue. And then a final comment I have is, as we look to achieving greenhouse gas reductions in various parts of our industry and other industries, it's important to realize that lots of times when we put water on the ground, it does come with some modest greenhouse gas emissions, yet the co-benefits are amazing. So we really need to, the proper public policy is to look at where to get those reductions in places that do not have a great cost environmentally to habitat.
This is George, just to kind of follow up on what Paul said here, what Jennifer and I have in Arkansas and what farmers here in the Mid-South have is not the lack of water. We have the water. Ours, I think, for the cost that it takes the water on those rice fields. It's one of the reasons I went to zero grade, because the cost of maintaining levees and repulling them and keeps up during the season can get quite expensive. So I think, you know, there needs to be funding in the Farm Bill, which there is some degree, but I think there needs to be more funding to reward farmers and landowners doing some great conservation during the winter time. It's really much, very little margin. That's not going different from California. Water. We have the water. It's the cost of keeping the water in those rice fields.
Okay, any other comments on that particular issue, or should we move to another question? Lydia, are we ready to move on?
Sure, we can move on to another audience question.
All right. Last one here before we have to wrap it up. This is a very good question. The science of sustainability is very much in its infancy, this person says. It's hard to translate how much sustainability will be achieved if growers commit to one or more management practices. What does the panel think about benchmarks that are currently out there now versus what reality is in the farms in an area? So anybody want to take that particular question? I can certainly restate it if necessary.
So this is Bill at Anheuser-Busch. I think the important message here is, you know, the question around the benchmark and what are we measuring ourselves to? And whenever it comes to sustainability, there's a couple, I guess, players in that realm who provide benchmarking indexes to compare, you know, production practices against. But you know, I think to the underlying point of the question is until we collect the data on a much granular scale, by field, by farm, by county, and you compare that to, you know, published benchmarks for the adoption of a certain watering technique, for example, I'm very confident you'll find that what these growers are doing currently outweighs any published benchmarks that are available. And so as we start setting the bar for continuous improvement, I think it then becomes, you know, pretty critical that we have that quantitative data year over year to then assess what is real, you know, what's our dream state, and what is a, you know, an agreed upon benchmark improvement to strive for every year. And also keeping in the back of our minds the impact of reaching that goal. So what are the consequences of it, if any, and what are the benefits? And look at the economic impact on the farm and on the region. And I think that'll set the stage for more accurate benchmarks to compare ourselves to.
Great, Bill. Thanks for that. Anybody else have a comment? Well, it doesn't sound like it, and that's all right because we are running out of time for today. We're actually over, but it was great to have so many fantastic presentations and a good Q&A period. So first of all, folks, I want to thank each of our speakers. Thanks to each of you for coming today and presenting your opinions and on this issue. We really appreciate your insights as well and all the experience you bring to this discussion. Lydia, I also thank you for co-moderating with me today and doing a great job in that role. And so lastly, I want to thank again our sponsors. Again, the sponsors that we had today made this freely available to you, the Rice Foundation and USDA NRCS. So we're very, very thankful for their support today. Lydia, any final comments before we wrap it up here?
Just want to thank you all for joining us again today and thank the speakers. We'll be putting on 3 more of these type webinars that are focused on rice sustainability. So be looking for the announcement of those coming up soon.
All right, great, Lydia. We thank you so much for that. All right, folks, thank you for joining today. We appreciate it. Until next time, have a great day, have a great week, and have a great harvest season. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.